Okay, good morning everybody. You're very welcome to the Toys4Engineers conference 2022. Great to be back here in the SETU arena after 3 years. We've had 2 years of COVID and being online, but today we're delighted that we're able to be back physically here in the arena for the conference and Expo. And indeed also online. We're actually broadcasting live online at the moment via YouTube. So again, you're all very welcome. The event is brought to you by Waterford Chamber, the Southeast Technological University, abbreviated as SETU. We're all trying to get used to that new title. And Engineering the Southeast Cluster, which is funded by Enterprise Ireland. My name is Ken Thomas. I'm the Head of School of Engineering here in SETU Waterford. I have the privilege to be the chair of today's conference. So when I say privilege, I think we're delighted to have such a fantastic lineup of speakers that we managed to persuade to join us here today. Some are online, but most of them are here with us in the room, and it's great to have them here. We have a very busy 2 hours in front of us. You've probably seen the schedule, or you may have seen the schedule. Most presentations are 15 minutes, and we have some time for questions and answers, and each time we will do so. But we also have a discussion at the end, around 11:45, I think it is, and we will hopefully save some questions for that as well. But I know some of the speakers are also staying around, and I think we'll be happy to take our questions or meet people individually perhaps afterwards, if that's okay. So all of us are aware of the sustainability, climate change, decarbonisation and energy challenges. So I think when we put together this lineup for the conference, we were very conscious of these big targets and big challenges. But more importantly, what can we do? Let's be practical here. What are the solutions? And there are solutions out there. So as engineers and creators of technology, and some of which is on Expo today, there are solutions out there. But they also involve, obviously, the community, and engineers on their own won't solve all these problems. So I think that might come across in many of today's presentations. We want to be as practical as possible and as positive as possible with this conference. So again, rather than being afraid of the future and a bit negative about a lot of the challenges in front of us, let's see if we can be a bit positive. And I see a lot of our students here in the audience today, and maybe you'll take that away with you as well as part of your degree. So without further ado, I think we're going to start with a video. I'm going to introduce it. It's a video from our MEP, our Member of the European Parliament, Grace O'Sullivan, who's a big supporter of this event and would have loved to have been here today, but unfortunately she's at a voting session in Strasbourg. But she has prepared a video for us, and I think it sets the context very nicely for today's conference, the big picture. So Owen, if you can play the video, please.
Greetings from the European Parliament, Brussels. I'm Grace O'Sullivan, MEP for Ireland South, which includes 12 counties of Ireland. It's my great honour to open this conference on hybrid green engineering, hosted by Southeast Technological University. It is quite appropriate then that I do so by way of hybrid working, sending you a video here from the Parliament, though I am sorry that I cannot be there with you today in Waterford, my home city. Thank you to Waterford Chamber for asking me to speak today. I know it will be a big year ahead for you, and it has been great to see my home county of Waterford springing back to life after 2 very difficult years of the pandemic. It's wonderful to see a green theme to the event this year, with the climate transition at its core. Most importantly, perhaps, the event looks set to be entirely solutions-oriented, with a focus on real and practical approaches to addressing the climate crisis. Working in the European Parliament and in European politics in general, it is easy to get quite tired of the targets, commitments and aims we see included in policy papers and reports. Today, we will see just how we achieve those aims in practical terms. So while it's vital that leadership comes from Europe, and we encourage member states and regions to act with urgency to confront the climate crisis, unless we have the means, the knowledge, the technology and the motivation to reach these commitments, then they are designed and destined to remain just words on paper. There has never been a period of such strong climate action leadership in Brussels, though there is always room for improvement. Under the banner of the European Green Deal, Member States are expected and encouraged to transform societies in a short space of time to end our dependence on fossil fuels and change our toxic relationship with nature. And so many of the sessions today overlap with the European Green Deal's priorities. So you will hear a session on cities. Ireland has got to grasp the nettle when it comes to changing our relationship with public space and urban centres. We need to move away from cities built for cars to cities built for people and for nature. Dublin and Cork are among 100 cities participating in the EU missions for climate neutrality and smart cities by 2030. And Waterford is aiming to be Ireland's first decarbonised city by 2040. Funding from Brussels will support research and innovation in the 1973 fuel crisis as it is today. Europe's only way forward is for energy independence, and the only way we can be energy independent is to invest in renewables. In Ireland, over 40% of our electricity is from renewables now. That figure would have seemed entirely unattainable not so long ago. Yet we are still reliant on coal and gas. It is vital now to tackle all of our energy sources with the same ambition and optimism. For me, a priority in the European Parliament is tackling environmentally harmful subsidies and the billions of euros that governments have.
Innovation, a lot of pioneers, and we can do things quickly if we get our act together. And I think she also mentioned many of the topics that we're going to talk about here today, obviously energy, but also transportation, data, buildings, and manufacturing. So there are practical things we hopefully can do and start to do quickly and make serious inroads against these challenges. So our next part of the context as well, not only did we think about Grace, we looked around Europe and said, well, who's good? Who's the best? And the European Green City of the Year this year is Grenoble in France. So we reached out to their council, and Klaus Habfast, who's a councillor, has agreed to talk to us today. And it was with an idea that maybe we could learn some lessons from a sister city in Europe as to how come they've got the label the best green city in Europe and what we can learn from them. So I think we've got a short video to play first, Owen, and then we'll hopefully get the Zoom link to work for Klaus. So thanks, Owen. Okay, so that video just gives you a very quick, it's a beautiful place, but our European Green City of the Year 2022, and Klaus Habfast is a councillor with the council in the city, and he's kindly agreed to talk to us via Zoom today. So, Klaus, I hope you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you well. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can, thank you. And we're looking forward to your presentation, Klaus, and maybe if we have some little to ask some questions at the end, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you today from Grenoble in France, the European Green Capital 2022. I would like to briefly take you through what it actually means to be a European Green Capital, because we are, of course, not the first. There have been others before. It was Bristol, no one in Ireland yet. It's a competition, European Green Capital, between cities, 200,000 inhabitants or more. It doesn't bring any funding. But visibility and invitations like the one I received kindly from today to speak to others. In order to win the competition of the European Commission, you have to be, you are evaluated using 12 criteria and an analysis of what you have done in the past, what you are doing today, and what you are planning for the future. There is 12 criteria: climate change, mobility, also air quality, noise, waste, water, and so forth. Grenoble was happy enough to be one or number two in 11 of the 12 criteria. The 12 criteria we have translated into challenges.
Klaus,
We will
Klaus, can you, yes, we don't see your presentation. Can you share it or share it?
the Zoom is currently not allowing to share a presentation.
Okay.
Maybe you could see whether you can, because yes, that would be practical. It says that you, the moderator, has deactivated screen sharing.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, should be able to try that now. Should be okay now, Klaus?
Yes. Here we are. Can you see my presentation?
Perfect, thank you.
Very good. Then I will go back to the slide. It's only 4 slides. So, and here you see the list of the Greens capitals since 2012, when Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain won the first one. Next year, actually, a couple of weeks from now, it will be Tallinn in Estonia, which is Green capital. And you see on the right, you see all the criteria that we have been evaluated upon, and where we were number 1 or number 2 in 11 out of these 12 criteria. We have in Grenoble decided to actually translate these 12 criteria into challenges. So Green Capital is not communication, is not only about events or about large congresses or delegations. In Grenoble we have decided that we would take these 12 topics, regroup them into main topics about waters to protect in a city, about nuisances to reduce for our citizens, and how to adapt to climate change. Because even if we would stop all our CO2 emissions by 2030 or 2040, climate change is going to continue. There is no way back to the climate 30 or 40 years ago for centuries. So we have to adapt in a situation of change and rising temperatures. So, and then we have given our citizens, our businesses, and also our organizations, non-profit organizations, we have given the possibility to meet these challenges and to make concrete actions happening in the city, using money we got from the government, also from the local authorities, in order to accelerate even further our transition to the future. The main aspects that would be of interest to you who are engineers. First of all, we believe that a city adapting to climate change, reducing carbon emissions, has to mobilize everybody. It can't come as a top-down approach. It has to be a bottom-up approach. So we mobilize citizens, we mobilize NGOs, non-profit organizations, and we in particular work with pupils and students, the young people, those who will be there in 2050, 2070, and also with artists. Because artists and culture are very often the possibility to translate for a public who is not a scientist or engineer what is good to do. And it's very important that technology will be, of course, very useful in our future, but it will be different, and we have to take the fear away from people that a different future will not be desired. If we go away from consuming always new items and go to repairing and reusing, this has to be using second-hand objects. This has to be desirable in order that people buy it. We have to think and act locally, which is in contradiction to a globalization of our economy, but it will be necessary in the future. And of course, we will have to those who don't have. this could be taxes on your income, but it could also be other and more and more ways of a sharing economy. So there is a whole culture of our society that has to change. The culture of consumption has to be different if we want to reduce our carbon footprint. And this is like to live with our here in Grenoble. Now I give you 3 examples where we have is playing a role. Street light. Already 10 years ago to replace all our street lights with LEDs. And LEDs that might actually, that only don't consume less, but you can switch them on or off if people are passing by. And now with the energy crisis, we actually start, not only in the city of Grenoble, but also the surrounding communities, to switch the lights in the night altogether. And we encourage people to do the same with their lights. So there is a whole cultural change. Formerly, a city was attractive if it was fully lit in the night, and the countryside dark in the night. Now, it deploys, but we also switch off the light in the night. Bicycles and public transport. Of course, I'm 64 years of age, so I live with the car being the vehicle that brought me to move around. But the individual car, the one driver, the solo driver in the car, certainly is not the future. So we, of course, don't work against the electric vehicle, but we reduce ever more the space disposable for individual vehicles in our city. We would with our citizens use bicycles, that might be e-bikes, and they use public transport, it might be hydrogen-powered public buses, but not individual vehicles, because that's not the future, and it's not sustainable for a city that is subject to climate change, because we have to plant trees. We have to make our city with trees and vegetation fit for the future. And as we talk about trees, we also, for example, organization facility in Grenoble, because we collect already now all the organic waste, compost. So we to capture that methane, which is a very powerful greenhouse, and then use it to produce electricity. And that will be done on the scale of 600,000 people, and the facility is underway of construction. So that's the way how we see that technology can be put at the service of climate change. Of course, we do this not as a city administration. We have built in the frame of Green Capital a local alliance, medium-sized and blue-chip companies. We have a few very big companies with our R&D centers here in Grenoble. And we, of course, we very much work then in this alliance with setting up cooperative ventures. We see these cooperative ventures that put together citizens and businesses as more sustainable than the startup, which in the end is only looking at globalization and a lot of money from investors and then selling products at high prices because they have set up a platform with a monopoly status. We believe more in cooperative ventures. So this is basically what I wanted to share. Our view, here in Grenoble, in France, in the Alps, on how technology and engineers can. And I hope that this was a bit inspiring for you, and of course I'm open to answer any questions you might have with pleasure.
For that, lots of big ideas, but also some very practical examples of how your city are doing things, which is good. You talked there about alliance, and obviously we are at an event here today. There's the university with the business chamber, with the council, with the communities. How do you make all of that work in a coherent way to turn your city into a green?
Grenoble is a city with a large university and with lots of R&D, and that's of course helping because many people have a scientific background. But on the other side, of course, it is very difficult for people to change if the benefits are in the far future. It's much easier to change if you have your benefit tomorrow, but changing for climate change for the benefit of your children. And there actually our situation in the mountain might has a cultural advantage. We are actually, you are at the sea. Mountains, you really have to play together. Otherwise, if you're on the boat or if you're on the mountains, you have to play together. It helped a lot. But then, of course, yes, it was a result of a team from 2014 to 2020 in the Municipal Council, of which I had the pleasure to be already part of. We worked hard and we had good luck, and that's the element that always plays a bit to have good luck.
Okay, au revoir.
Goodbye, au revoir.
Okay, whether we're the same as Grenoble or not, I'm not sure, but it's always good to look around and see who's the best and to learn some lessons. Some of those practical ideas are easy to adopt, like street lights and so on. Other ideas, maybe not. Waterford might be one of those challenges we have here. I'm curious about data, and again, our next speaker is going to talk a little bit about data, and it's Bill Wilson, who's the head of data and sustainability solutions at SETU Data. So I invite Bill to the stage, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. Ken for this invitation to speak at Toys4Engineers. Our data and sustainability solutions at SETU Data. We're a provider of digital and data solutions in the UK and Ireland. We've been working in this territory for more than 25 years. But we're actually part of a wider global technology company. It's probably about the 8th or 9th largest in the world. And that means that loads of crazy toys and innovation teams are working on. Here's 3 examples. Here you can see artificial photosynthesis, data space, and trying to grab energy from lightning storms and harness it to use in autonomous vehicles. So loads of interesting stuff, and I really wanted to bring some of these toys to show you today. But do you know what? Aer Lingus are getting very picky about their bag and it wasn't possible. So instead what I'm going to talk to you today is about green IT, and hopefully this provides an interesting contrast with some of the other topics that we're talking about today. So I think it'd be fair to say when you consider energy, building, which we're also going to be hearing about, the IT sector has a big advantage because we're able to iterate our products and services much faster. And I think that's why the technology sector is leading the world in some of these sustainability initiatives. If you take Microsoft, for example, some of you may know they've committed to raising their by 2050. But nevertheless, IT globally has between 2 and 3% of global carbon emissions. And it's a problem for us at NTT Data because we're the 3rd largest provider of data centers in the world. You guys in Ireland as well. I was reading in the Irish Times how the is causing a real strain on the national grid. So our business is more than tin and wires. Tin and wires are in the wrong place, and there's a natural disaster, and we're for those because of climate change. It can cause service outages in the services we provide. And so, like many sectors, we have the two IT resilient to climate change, but also how to decarbonise IT. And I'm more focusing on that second one. So we're going to look at a few mega trends in IT and some of these you'll recognise. But don't worry, I'm starting big picture and then zooming right in. So, you know, hopefully everyone will get something out of this talk. And I recognise that this conference brings people from wide different walks of life. And I think one of the takeaways here is that when it comes to IT, everyone can make a difference to how your role is in producing software systems, whether you buy software. Say that I don't consider myself an expert in this very sector. But I'm able to draw on a huge range of colleagues at NTT Data around the world. So, for example, next week we're going to be talking to a Dublin-based national pharmaceutical how to measure the carbon footprint of some of their equipment with the help of a team from Barcelona. So, let's look at some of these mega trends then. The first one is around collaboration. And we do a lot of our business. A lot of customers do it to improve agility, also to save costs. But I've also done a lot of reading around this area, and the number I'm putting up today is 87% emissions reduction by moving workloads that you might do on a traditional premise data center into the cloud. And that's for two reasons. One is that when you have multiple consumers all basically using the same compute resource at the same time, you get tremendous efficiency. But also in these very large data centers, efficient in use of power and some clever cooling technology that you'll find out about later. At the other end of the spectrum, the edge. So this is computing activity that happens out in the field. Maybe this resonates more with in the audience. So this would be sensors with some compute power attached. And let me give an example of a project I worked on which kind of illustrates this. So a couple of years ago, it's actually a smart city project. So using camera technology to detect objects moving around cities, typically pedestrians and vehicles. The camera such that what type of object it was seeing and sort of trace the route of those objects. And what that meant was being sent back to the cloud significantly reduced, so we save on energy costs of network backhaul, but also processing that had to happen was reduced as well. Interestingly, when we were working on that project, we started seeing some very interesting pedestrian patterns, basically people who seem to be walking around in circles. And we thought, oh, hang on, has the AI here? So we looked at the time, we found from the pub completely drunk and literally wandering around in circles. So that was the answer to that. But I want to focus really on these two middle things. And the first is about cloud optimization. And that's all about reducing the resources you need to run given applications. And then the second one around cloud decouple. We have to have large data centers and the world needs more of them. How do we build and run those data centers in a more carbon efficient way? Oh, and by the way, let me talk about a couple of these numbers. So typically when you undertake cloud optimization activities, you can save about 40% carbon footprint through that. And this figure of 90%, which you can see on the screen, is actually commitments to net zero in 2030. And we're going to achieve that 90% through three things. One is essentially sourcing more renewable energy. We're expecting the grid to provide that, and we were hearing earlier from our MEP about how we're moving forward with that. But also a second piece is new type of technology, which I'll tell you about later, which is using light to electronic equipment, and also general data efficiency in the data centers. Now, in the small print, it says about Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So 1 emissions, if you haven't heard about this, this is the fuel you burn in the operations of your business. So maybe you've got a boiler heating your office. In the context of a data center, it would be your backup generator, or what we call fugitive gases from air conditioning systems. They all leak, and the refrigerant gases that leak into the atmosphere are many times worse than carbon in the greenhouse effect. So even a small refrigerant gas leak causes a big net equivalent effect. The other, of course, well, and then Scope 2 emissions is all about the energy used from the grid. Into these a little bit more around cloud optimization. And this workload is doing the same amount of work with less resources. And I'm sure other speakers will end up talking about this as well. To be very specific, examples would be reducing the number of virtual machines you're running in the cloud, or shutting off test environments you're not using. I know, Ken, you wanted to get super specific here, so replacing a base server with a PaaS service on the cloud. So a PaaS service, that stands for service, so that's where the cloud provider is providing resources and services that many people can use at the same time. I know I'm young enough, but cut my teeth in IT optimizing Oracle 7 databases, and there was a lot involved in that for you by cloud providers. But I think the sort of area is these two things, which are related. And the first one's about measuring the carbon footprint and consumption of your applications. So that's about achieving a baseline. And the second area is actually carbon optimizing those applications. And you'll see something common here, which is the Green Software Foundation. That's an organization that is dedicated to understanding software more environmentally friendly. We're members of that alongside people like Microsoft and Intel. And so let's just talk first of all about this first area of software. I do quite a lot of work with companies helping them understand their overall carbon footprint. That's tricky enough. But when you want to get down to effectively lifecycle management around a particular application, there's quite a few things to consider. First of all, there's a carbon footprint of developing in the first place. So this is the engineers working on it, the architects, the project managers, software. But those overheads as well. And then the second consideration is what we call the carbon footprint in life. So this is made up of what's embodied carbon of the applications running on blades, the enclosures, the disk subsystems applications you're running, goes from nothing through to being in your data center ready to use. And then the second element is energy use in life of that infrastructure, and that's a combination of direct energy use and cooling as well. And then, so what this measure is all about really is what we call marginal emissions. So what we're interested in is as we add more workload to an application, how much does its carbon footprint go up? So it might be we add another 100 users. What's the change? A lot of this sounds quite tricky, but the cloud providers are actually making it a bit easier. So I'm quite familiar with what AWS and Azure are doing, and they provide quite a lot of instrumentation on the carbon footprint of your infrastructure. And what that means, in theory, you can run some workload, have a look at what the cloud is reporting back, and then run a different workload and make some comparisons. So there's a few caveats with that, but basically better instrumentation is coming. Once you're at that stage of measurement, you've already built and architected your application. So the second area is how to get low carbon applications in the first place. How do we set down design principles for engineers and architects building these solutions? That's where the carbon aware SDK comes in. And let me just give you a few examples, because this is a very broad area. But if you take services that can easily scale down with the workload, application isn't really big, it's using virtually no carbon. Using things like spot instances on the cloud, you can take advantage of when the cloud is quiet and not many people are using it. But you could workloads to locate in the cloud where the renewable is better, more natural cooling. Workloads on Azure to different areas of the world, you can actually see how that changes the carbon footprint of your application. Some of this stuff is quite nice for things like AI training, so I also lead our AI capability at NTT. AI models is very computationally expensive, but it's not something you're doing all the time. So it's a great offshoring to somewhere like Iceland, who happens to have both of these kind of capabilities and natural cooling. And indeed, BMW were developing, which is their tiny electric. They did all the kind of crash test simulations in Iceland deliberately because of the carbon credentials of doing that work. Some of you may also have seen this, which is a Microsoft data center that was under the sea, just off the north coast of Scotland. And obviously the sea is providing natural cooling. Now you might be thinking, well, you know, what's wrong? It's not very. But Microsoft managed to keep it under the sea for 2 years without requiring any maintenance. And also didn't seem to bother the sea life either. If you look very carefully at this picture, you might be able to see some barnacles of the cells in this data center. Or a user experience designer, for example, using less media or being more selective how you use it, using HTML rather than PDF, using frameworks like accelerated mobile pages, or dark mode UIs, because then you're reducing the energy consumption to the end user devices. And there's more efficient graphics formats and so on. So now I want to finally come to the actual, the third largest data center estate in the world. Start with a data set around what and enrich that information with information from manufacturers. Now, manufacturers are providing very important data at the moment. It's also changing because they're finding out more about this topic as well. With then information with data about energy consumption and the renewables grid. And as our MEP was talking about earlier, the percentage of renewables also changing. When you've got that data set and you're in a position to do scenario planning, if we retire this equipment, what equipment should we buy? Where should we buy it from? And some of our clients are really specific information about the carbon footprint of infrastructure, and that won't surprise you when I tell you that we run data centers for Microsoft as well. Building a new data center, you get to put in more innovation. So, for example, our new data center in Munich uses 30% less energy in cooling because we're able to use groundwater as part of cooling. These are pictures from our latest data center in London, imaginatively called London 1. Air conditioning in the data center, it's all using chilled water to. Now, clearly, you can't use that technique everywhere because some places water is in short supply. It's a precious resource. Who knows, with the summer we've had, London. We use water in a very different way. It's kind of horses for courses. The other thing that I was mentioning earlier is, and is forming part of our net zero strategy, is a brand new technology from NTT Data called ION. And fundamentally, ION is all about using light to communicate between electronic components rather than electricity. And that means it's very significantly reduced energy. Now, we're all familiar with this, but this is taking light right inside the chip. Now, I wanted to bring some examples of chips to show you today. But at the end of the day, looking at circuit boards is pretty boring. Actually, that's not quite true. I have a board at home that has an image of a circuit board underneath it, and then certain of my friends try and have fun deciding what type of equipment that circuit board is. You know who you are. So we started this talk with NTT Data Innovation. That's where we're kind of ending. But I want to add one more thing about end users, because I said earlier on that everyone can be part of helping to decarbonise IT. So let me finish with a story about some work I was doing last year. It's the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. And they wanted to play back to end users how their use of office technology was impacting carbon footprint. Basically, this would be, somebody's sending a lot of attachments, using a lot of multimedia. Sure, NTT Data can help with that. Do you really think that the micro use will really change? You're going to see those nudge effects. And they said, yeah, we think we will. Seen this technique. So one of the things that was very simple Waterford did was ask people to avoid using lifts if they could and take the stairs in their buildings. Now, of course, that's not only healthy, but it also reduces the energy draw for the lifts. And they saw a noticeable reduction in the use of lifts in their buildings. So sometimes you don't need smart toys. About conference today. So all our stand material is being impounded in Dublin Airport. But come and some more. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Bill. That was great. Yeah, Bill is for a little, but I'd be happy to talk to anybody and everybody. His colleague Kieran is here as well. So thanks to NTT Data. I mean, we all use our phones, we all use our computers every day, and we need to think about how we're using them, and then in the background, how Bill pointed to, they are very, really important in solving that problem. Our next speaker, this one is here. Even huge in decarbonisation, and we're delighted to have the CEO of Bus Éireann here today, Stephen Kent. So I can invite him to the stage now to give his presentation.
Thanks very much, Ken. And I'm a local as well. I live out in Tramore, so I'm here today, and it's very useful. Everybody at least has had a bus ride at some point in their life. So I just wanted to talk to you about our own road to zero emissions and what we're doing. Now, I'll go through this very quickly, but just to give you a sense of the company itself, we carry about 90 million journeys, and I think we'll be well on our way to about 100 million journeys over the next 3 to 4 years. And this is quite complex. The things that you see operating in the cities and the towns, they're operated on behalf of the National Transport Authority. There's about 200 we do there. Then we have Expressway that runs about 14 commercial routes. But the school transport business operates about 7,000 with about 6,000 vehicles right around the country. We contract all of that in, and we manage the administration of all of that. So it's complex, and we do all of that through these 17 depots that are around the country. And they're important because they're effectively assets of the state. They're going to be sitting there. Around each of those depots, we probably have 350 to 400 mechanics and apprentices, all in different parts. And if I look at Waterford, that out of the 2,800 employees we have in our company, you know, if you look down and through Waterford at the moment, there's just less than about 100 in the city here. We contribute a value add of about 24 million. And like if you travel on the services, the NTA would say currently it's the best scheduled punctuality in the country. Now you have to do all of that because you have to put a lot of building blocks in place to do that. Now if I just move on the vehicles right, get them and put them in and make them electric, we'll chat about that for a second. But in reality, we have been at pains to say the infrastructure is really, really important to us. There's no point about the manufacturers developing the vehicles, i.e. the types of we operate, not having the capacity to deal with that. And lastly, the country at the moment probably sitting in front of a lot of craftspeople, mechanics that have all been dealing with the internet for the last 100 years. And as you sit in front of them, you're saying, you know, you've come in, and many of you as mechanical engineers, and my colleague today from Dublin, mechanical engineer. Now what's happening into the realms of electrical engineering, and all of that to some extent is daunting for some of them, and for others exciting, and we're trying to get that balance right, because there's no doubt about it, it's have to move into the future and how we're going to manage that. When I talk about types of partnerships that we have as a company, these are the types of people now that we have to work with on a daily basis, whether it's the SEA or the ESB. We're absolutely, and I'll give you a classic example. If you want to try and get power into a major depot, a lot of our depots are located in cities, and to get those power in, it's not turning on a switch. We have to travel in our dialogue with the NTA. You might have to bring power from 2 kilometers away to generate that amount of power. So there is significant infrastructure and time to get that in place. And then, of course, planning is a whole other matter. All of those matters that all have to be addressed. So it's significant. The fortunate thing from our perspective is that there are policy documents now in place to guide the investment. It wasn't there in the past. So when you look down through a lot of the things that are now being put in place by the government, the National Development Plan, the Climate Action Plan, all of these are now being brought through in our company. Talk to the policy. It's more likely to unlock the funding. This is a significant investment that's going to have to be made, many, many, many millions that are going to have to be invested over the next number of years. And each of those policies set out things about what they want to do in the budget and how much. And you can see that inside the mobility policy, they're saying 40% of the national fleet that operate, and that would be talking about the fleet that operate in the city, must be low to zero by 2025. So you might have heard the minister coming out yesterday on the back of an OECD report. Grenoble, take back the roads, convert more space into sustainable mobility. Their challenge at the moment is that 2050 is too far away. The huge pressure I get as managing the business is, what can you make happen now by 2025? So that's where the pressure is lying. And for us now, I'm saying to them at the moment, we have to work through a project and looking at the individual locations that we can electrify and get ready. So when I talk to you about 17 depots around the country, we're going to map out what way we will see our EV readiness being and given the timeline. And you can see Waterford at the moment up in 2026. And that's because there are a number of projects just coming right in front of it. And we're working with the National Transport Authority. And it partly depends on the vehicle availability and knowing the schedule of vehicle deliveries. So this is the way it's happening. Now you can see the very first one on the map is Athlone. And you're wondering about Athlone, and just to give you an example, Athlone, we're going to be targeting in this company at the moment to get in 11 vehicles. Entirely, one single town has 11 vehicles running in it. It has a topography that's fairly straight, not hilly and things like that. We have a network that we're able to, the ESB now procured. We have to put in all the substation piece, and there's a huge amount of people. And the things then that we have to test, because you'll have read it all about it, and at the moment, I'm driving an electrical car, and I know the planning that has to take it into buses and for people who are paying for a service. The whole type of thing is how good are the loading conditioning to January? Are we going to get the range? Do you need an extra to be ready at the end of the journey? How do you manage breakdowns? Completely different, complex, different set of challenges for us to manage as a business. So we're looking at what we'll be doing in January, and certainly when we get in here, is learning from that project in Athlone. That's all entirely reliant on service before we go into bigger cities. So when I go down into a big city like Cork, I'm not going from 11 vehicles, I'll be moving into 150 vehicles. And of course the NTA through their Bus Connects program, you've heard, are looking to add another 100. So that becomes quite demanding in terms of listening to the data. Certainly we will demand as well in relation to electricity supply. So and I know this is an engineering conference, and I'm not an engineer, I'm a commercial marketer, but the people we work with, we're saying it actually doesn't matter. We're bringing this across every single discipline in our company, saying this isn't something that happens over there. I want the accountants, I want everybody trapped into this. But for us, it's an understanding that a lot of the journey that we're on at the moment is you move from being into lower emission by this conversion that's happened in 2000. But everybody has been moving in this transition from a vehicle, as you know, that has been Euro 1 standard up to now at the moment Euro 6 standard. And if we get all of that, there's about a 92% saving in and the particulate matter. So in many ways it is a significant. The reason I'm saying that at the moment is for a lot of our people think both buses and coaches, but the coaches that do from a technical point of view with the manufacturers to move into the space of electric and to move into a space of hydrogen. That journey has begun, and in the short term, the best solution is going to be it's a low emission. Euro 6 is what's going to be there by 2025. So everybody has to have a transition plan to move into that minimum standard of 6 in terms of the engine. And as you can see here now, the journey that's beginning to happen from the up on the right hand side into hybrids, and so really you're starting to move down in the axis and to remove those emissions. It's moving back down into probably the bottom right-hand side, it's either going to be a fuel cell or a electric vehicle to deal with the challenges are and move you into that zero emission spectrum long term. Now, all of that and that cost trajectory is something that has to be talked about. This is a great chart that was done by one of our engineers, and because of the audience, this is an example of the way things have moved. This bill is kind of saying that, look, we're taking energy from those various, but he wants to have that's developed more reliant on renewable energy source than fossil fuel. The charging infrastructure that we're going to have to put into those depots requires a complete re-layout of how we manage vehicles and how they sit in depots and having all of those. So we've issued doing all of that. So when you get inside and you look at all the individual vehicles for those electrical vehicles, we'll be looking at is 470 kilowatt, and there'll be a big large onboard battery, and these will require maybe 6 hours charging overnight. So for us, that is part of the solution. When we're going to have a vehicle issue, you're still going to require that turnaround and doing it. We'll have to manage that, and we'll know that the charge depletes in motion. And on the other side, we're trying to take a view then on what's going to happen with hydrogen, and listening to Grenoble there, listening to hear him talking about hydrogen in the cities is not currently the path that we're following in Ireland. We're going electrical in the cities, and that's the path that's going to be followed in the short term. Now, longer term, the fueling infrastructure and what we will see as fueling infrastructure for hydrogen is going to be really important. And again, you can see the whole bus is a very different layout in terms of the bus, because obviously reliant again on having all of the H2, the storing, and the batteries are charged right through. We're looking at the city range and the electrical delivering about 100 to 300 kilometers, but on the hydrogen, it seems to be offering up to 500 kilometers. So on a number of the commuter routes, and we would have an expressway, for instance, that runs from Derry down to Galway. That's a 260 kilometer journey. It's a commercial route. The state isn't funding it. You have to do it yourself. So we want to make sure that we can do that efficiently, doing one run, one driver. When you have to put another vehicle into the mix, I'm probably adding somewhere between 40 grand maintenance a year back into your bottom line by maintaining another vehicle, apart from the asset and the capital deployment to do it in the first place. And then with the current investment models, these are not inexpensive vehicles. Hydrogen currently is in a state at the moment where you're probably going to be paying 650 for a bus there, and a commercial bus at the moment we're probably paying 300, 350 to 400. Electrics are probably going to be in that range, 400 to 500. They're more expensive, but everything goes, green is not an expensive route, and what we'll need is scale in order to bring some of those prices down. So to give you an example, hydrogen, we began the process, and I just wanted to talk about hydrogen for a couple of seconds. We began the process with research trials. It began all in 2020, and you can see the number of people that we've had to do. You cannot do this by yourself. You've got to do it with the Department of Transport. We partnered with the DCU so that they could maintain the data analysis. We did it with BOC gases because they had to store this and create the hydrogen supply for us. And we partnered again with Toyota. So what you have, what I've to these projects is a huge amount of stakeholders that come together in order to make a project. One here, and it effectively went into vehicle design, and now at the moment we have 3 double-deck buses that are out on the road in Dublin at the moment, all sitting on one route, and all of the learning and the data and the optimization of the vehicle usage is all being learned at the moment. But from our perspective, as we look at it, if you look at the carbon saving, which we did right through from July to December when we deployed, that it's equivalent to buses deep, 25 buses wide, similar vehicles in terms of the carbon abatement. So that's a really important. We know that there's certainly great savings to be done longer term, but the upfront investment is significant. And then all of the handling costs and what we have to do on storage. And now the bigger issue at the moment is probably where is the supply of hydrogen going to go? And as we know, people will want green hydrogen. They want green hydrogen longer term. So where does it come from? And this is why it's interesting moment and talking about the potential creation of a hydrogen that's using and deploying wind onshore and offwind from the Bay of Galway. And if that could be put in place, back to my example of Galway, travelling from Derry down to Galway and possibly onto Cork, to me, there's a great in having a hydrogen fuel infrastructure on that, where we could run and we could make sure that there's continuity of supply, and that would be of interest. In the short term, we've had to move into hybrid development, and I'm glad we had to move in with this. These were bought by the for the vehicles, and they've been deployed already into Galway. So when you go into Galway, they're operating right now with these hybrid. Now, they give a 20% reduction in diesel, so there's a great saving, but they also have a reduction in carbon emissions. So they have been a great start in their operating. And then the bigger plan, like I said then with Athlone, is now moving into the first of the battery electric vehicles. So we had the first of them only arrive in July, brought 2 of them down, we're beginning to trial them. And now what we're doing is we're going in on the routes prior to December. We're trying to put in all the charging points, start getting everybody engaged around the training, the reskilling of all of the workforce to doing all of that. And I'd hope certainly to be out, start to roll on the ground in January of 2023. So that's when the real trial begins for us. And all of those are just right now in manufacturing. Our drivers and vehicles are over there looking at it being manufactured, and I'd hope to be landing. So that I wanted to leave with you today from an engineering and a decarbonisation view is that our view is that it won't be one single solution. We're more likely to have a battery electric solution, particularly for the cities, shorter journeys, shorter ranges, but we can do it, and that you have those depots in place. And then longer term then, I think the fuel cell EV and what we're going to do with hydrogen. There are other trials that are going to happen. There's work going on with HVO as well. That's hydrogenated vegetable oil. But the more likely path is going to be hydrogen. I can see emerging, and certainly that's come to merge. And if you can do all of that, then you're starting to address what we at the very beginning, move our dependence away from fossil fuel. And as you could imagine, as a big supplier, CIE, amount of buses, and you've seen we have 1,000 buses out on the road at the moment, and Dublin bus something similar, and then the rail. So we're buying all that diesel right, that kind of consolidated bulk supply, and us finding a path where we're going to reduce our dependence, but then potentially look at electrolyzers in our own house, potentially going to be seen if we can, produce hydrogen ourselves. That's the long-term vision. And I'll only end by, because ultimately, the very beginning part of the meeting, this and for the mechanics. And I have copies of this if anybody wants it. Carl Nelson is sitting here. 2 things I was going to say. Of what we look at as our sustainability plan, how we're reporting it, what we see as the performance. We've brought that in and we've published that, and we're making sure that that is known by the stakeholders, but foremost known by every one of our employees in terms of the way we're moving on our sustainability. We call it driving change. So that's what we're doing in the first instance. And the second is, today we just have one of our hybrid vehicles located just outside in the car park. If anybody wants to come out, Nelson will give you a view of what's behind the. If you're interested in seeing that, it is a transition into the future, and it's worthwhile seeing that if you can see that and you're interested. So with that, I hope that's informative, at least shows you the path to decarbonisation, and thank you for the invitation today.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, very interesting, and I'm sure somebody might take you up on that offer. Some of our students might want to drive the bus. Yeah, James, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I think obviously we touched a lot there on the transition from mechanical to electrical, and obviously hydrogen as well. But it which I'm going to try and bring up here. So our next presentation is on green hydrogen, and Stephen mentioned green hydrogen there, hydrogen created by renewable energies or renewable mechanisms. I think on here. So Robord is from Gas Networks Ireland. They also have a stand here today, and I'm sure your presentation, I think, is on a pathway to decarbonisation for Ireland. Looking forward to it.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Ken. Thanks to Stephen for stealing a lot of my lines. Really great content about solving complex problems. It always comes down to a blend of lots of different technology solutions trying to go in the one. I'm here to talk about a pathway to decarbonisation of Ireland's gas. I'm going to play a large part in that, and that's of where we need to get to with the gas network. Gas Networks Ireland at the moment, fossil fuel transporting network. We transport natural gas. Transport gas, so it doesn't have to be natural gas, and we are acutely aware that we move towards decarbonised gases. That's where we have to go to. We're a fossil fuel company transporting natural gas almost exclusively, and we need to move towards decarbonised gases. But we have a history of changing. I'm going to talk about the decarbonised gases in a minute, but just to kind of give a bit of an overview on the company. We've had gas in Ireland going back to the 1700s. Town's gas, which was a derivation of coal, was used for street lighting, and that was proliferated across the country. And then in the 70s we found gas off Kinsale, and that led to the founding of Gas Networks Ireland. And so the gas networks changed, and it happened. Renewable gases now are coming on stream. They're being produced, and there's a lot of text within the gas networks to accommodate them. So, we need to change again, and that's what we're doing. Just to give you an indication of, I suppose, the size and the scale of the gas network. I mean, prior to 6 months ago, a lot of this wouldn't have been very clear to a lot of people, but I think a lot of people are becoming a lot more interested and informed about the gas network, and it's important to Ireland's economy now. Look, we have, over 710,000 customers. We added 8,000 customers last year. This network would wrap. It transports over 55 terawatt hours of gas each year, and that's about twice what the electricity network can handle. It doesn't go down. It's got a resilience with your interconnectors. You see our entry point. So obviously the Corrib up in Sligo, about 20% of our gas. Most of it comes through the interconnectors with the UK. The second interconnector was completed in 2019, and that gives 100% resilience to the interconnectors. We have gas obviously from Kinsale, but that's been decommissioned. And in County Kildare, there's actually another injection point where we're injecting into the network, and I'll talk a bit about that as well because it is part of the pathway to decarbonisation. Look, what we do in wind in Ireland is world class. I mean, for onshore, world amount of wind per capita, but gas allows that to do what it can. And it's just kind of to underscore the importance of the natural gas network. We are all aware of it, but when you put it up on a chart, you can see the flexibility and how gas affords wind to do its thing. Even, I think it was Tuesday morning at 1 a.m., 97% of our energy load was met by wind, which is amazing. It was the third highest reading ever. But in August, 91% of our energy was produced by natural gas. So, we are world class at wind, able to produce energy when we don't have wind, and that's why the gas is aware of it, but I think the figures themselves paint the picture in stark reality. This is just a look at, in terms of the decarbonization, back on what I said at the start, about a combination of solutions. So if we get to 100% renewable electricity, you can see in terms of our emissions, we still have such a big challenge ahead of us to get to net zero. So electricity is one part of the challenge, but in terms of heavy, hard to decarbonize industries such as agriculture, heavy industries, power gen, there's a big challenge in terms of decarbonizing the whole. So that's why we view natural gas and the decarbonisation of the network as part of a component. You have wind producing energy. Obviously, then the ambition is that green hydrogen in the pipes, biomethane feeding into it. So combined solutions are going to be needed to get us to where we need to get to by 2050. before we get on to green hydrogen, going to be the way of the gas network anyway, is biomethane. Biomethane is a aerobic digestion, and like this is real, it's happening. We're injecting 2 gigawatt hours a month of biomethane into the gas network each month in Cushing, County Kildare. Coming from 2019, where it just started, they're going to inject about 25 gigawatt hours now this year. So, like relatively, I mentioned 55 terawatt hours at the start, proportionally, but from the base it's coming from, it's a big start. And you know, in Denmark, flows in their grid is biomethane. So, like this is being done at the moment, and we need to get on board with that. In gas networks. So in Nerney and in Cush, that's our first central. And you may have heard in the news over the last number of months that there's been funding secured 8.5 times bigger than the ejection point in Kildare. It has the ability to take biomethane in lots of anaerobic digesters all across Munster and the wider Ireland, but it does need some policies to support it. AD developers, but they need security of pricing for the biomethane that they will produce to be able to make their business able to bring them to development. So turning sod probably biogas being produced there in the following year. So exciting times in the biomethane space as well. In terms of hydrogen, look, we get 75% of our from the UK, and in the UK they're going to be bringing hydrogen network in contractually. We're obliged to be accepting hydrogen in the first over 2025. So this is going to happen. So we have to get on board with it. So in gas networks, we've opened a network innovation centre in partnership with UCD. It's in Browns Barn, just off City West. It basically is a mini closed loop, and it's testing all the types of hydrogen, percentage of use, appliances, safety testing. Hydrogen itself, the density of air. You know, it's a lot lighter, so the high risk of the little escape valves and stuff like that. So there's an awful lot of work needs to go into that. We are anticipating and expecting the government's hydrogen strategy before the end of the year. They up the consultation on that over the last number of weeks, number of months really, I suppose. So we're keen. But we do know it's going to be firmly focused on green hydrogen, and that is the route we're taking in Ireland. So for our part in Ireland, we are hydrogen backbone in terms of getting ready for the transport. Stephen spoke about hydrogen corridors, one place or another where it's needed, and this is kind of what the hydrogen backbone is about. It's about purposing existing pipes in the ground in Europe along with new pipes and using those to transport hydrogen through corridors. For our part in Ireland, we're firmly in the green hydrogen space. The Repower EU announcement from Ursula von der Leyen back in coming out of the war really. So this was, and you probably have seen it in the news, this is a move to get Europe off its reliance from Russia. So there's a huge push towards renewable gases. So the is 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen by 2030 produced, and another 10 million imported. So that's 20 million tons. At the moment in Europe, we produce about just under 10 million tons of hydrogen, and 4% of it is green. So 97% of it is grey hydrogen. Basically, it's got from steam reforming of methane, so the carbon is left evaporate, captured. With green hydrogen, you produce that from water through electrolysis. There's zero carbon produced. So the way Europe is moving is this basically creating a hydrogen economy, getting the hydrogen system up and running, and as the green technology catches up, being able to facilitate that and displace the carbon producing or blue hydrogen. So, you know, the move towards green hydrogen from ours, obviously the real ambition is offshore wind is able to power the green hydrogen. In electricity, I think 36% of our electricity in 2020 was renewable. That was, or 31%, down the previous year, but 11% of our electricity was wasted. It couldn't be harvested. So there's a real need to be able to accommodate that extra electricity and to store that in the pipes, really getting ready for the arrival of urbanization to 2030 and 2050. I haven't spoken about CNG and transport today, but like it's going to be a combination of technologies. Hard to decarbonize industries in particular are most suitable for hydrogen and green hydrogen. And like we view the gas network, it's a €4 billion state asset. It's plugged into every home. Well, homes, businesses, and industry in the country are plugged into it. So if we decarbonise at source, you decarbonise the whole thing without having to do expensive, invasive retrofits or. So the potential is there, and it behoves us to use it. Please drop by our stand if you have any questions or any thoughts. Hope you find it interesting, and thanks very much.
Thanks, report. Very interesting, and yeah, green hydrogen I think is in a lot of the headlines, but the infrastructure is going to take a while to figure out. But it looks like we're on the right path there, and that's definitely going to be part of the mix. I think a lot of the things the report said there resonated with the other. I think every presenter said there's no one thing that's going to solve a lot of issues. It's going to have to be a combination. So I think our next speaker is hopefully ready to go. I'm going to invite John Lacey from Siemens to the stage to give his presentation on green buildings. John is a graduate, actually. John, here again, and thanks for supporting today's event.
Hi. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, great to be back in Waterford. It's more than a few years, 25 with a degree in construction management from Waterford IT. Yeah, it's been a great journey since then, finishing in 1997. I got out just in time to get ready for the Celtic Tiger and building after very large-scale construction projects all over. It quietened down then a little bit later on, and I went back to energy management. Can you hear me okay there? Yeah, good. And joined Siemens soon afterwards, starting my second career as an energy data analyst, focused on energy performance contracting for large industry, manufacturing really industry in Ireland and the UK, before just year to become their smart buildings lead and join the smart Siemens. So today I'm going to focus on green buildings and digitalization in particular to deliver more sustainable buildings. Okay, I think starting on Siemens there about a week, actually 85 years ago in 1847 in Berlin, Siemens was formed, and they've been innovating ever since with a huge amount of R&D expenditure and a lot of grant patents and ongoing. So one of the top 10 software companies in the world, which you might be surprised to hear, and first major industrial company to convert carbon neutral based on science-based targets, and well on the way with 50% reduction at 2020 already. In Ireland, quite a history there since went to Ireland in 1896, I think, to install transatlantic cables, and then back in 1925 for electrification state in Ardna, Russia, hydroelectric power plant. In Ireland and globally, electrification, digitalization, and always innovation. So my focus is really on this latter half over the last 10 years, are further developments and building automation in light of IoT technology, a company acquired from Silicon Valley in 2018, and our building digital twin company, Ecodomus, which complements our existing digital twin portfolio for buildings. And this year we released our building and acquired another company, great large American company called Brightly, which is a leader in asset and maintenance solutions based on SaaS platforms. So a few of the milestones along the way. Topics that our before me have spoken about, specifically to buildings. I suppose the coronavirus pandemic had quite an impact there. To the change, with 30% of our buildings office space will be being flexible space 2030. There's much more focus on health. I think we're getting a better of and moving towards dealing with our 80% total life cycle costs better, maybe during the design and procurement stages, as well addressed. But really what it comes down to, I suppose, and our main topic today is decarbonisation. Currently 37%, this up a little bit for myself, of total national emissions are based in the built environment. So the enablers to deal with these challenges is digitalisation, and I suppose 75% digitalisation as a key enabler for this change. Building stock. So we've got our IoT sensors, a Connect box. I don't have time for the Zego CC, but anyone in pharma or large industry, it's the leading BMS system there. I'll introduce you to our Building X, which just came out this year. Okay, here's a little sensor from Enlighted. It fits in the lights. So this is a Silicon Valley-based company that Siemens acquired a couple of years ago, and yeah, each one has a processor, so it holds onto the data. A lot of work done on the edge, and only the necessary data then transmitted and used to either directly to our lighting for better lighting, with some nice connectivity through Bluetooth and also a radio signal. So it can detect our PIR motion sensor, light level detection, power consumption from the light fittings, temperature, environment, and then the Bluetooth signal going both directions from the sensor, and then we can have Bluetooth tags to either on assets or people to say in real time where things are through your facilities. But the secret, I suppose, is getting these in, and the energy saving place. So it's of IoT and future-proof your buildings, but also so they're nifty little things. I thought I'd them to you here today. Along with an LED retrofit, we're doing a very big one in West Dublin, in one of the biggest biopharmaceutical plants in the world at the moment, rolling it out, taking out the light fittings, reusing the light fittings themselves and installing the LEDs and our smart sensors. So yeah, traditionally you have a BMS on site. Oftentimes the subsystems are siloed. Sometimes they're being brought together in a system like the Zego CC, which sit on top of all of the different fire, safety, HVAC, lighting, power subsystems. But with Building X, we're bringing it all together. You don't necessarily have to do that on site by networking all the different devices, but connect individual edge devices to each of the different systems, with the hardware or the system or the BMS, and bring all that data to the cloud in one place, for not just for a single building, but for a building portfolio. So we're doing our best to try and make it as easy as possible to help services of buildings to be easier, create a digital twin with the data that's available, and have an IoT platform and provide digital services. So just a little overview of the basic architecture, I suppose, starting with the connectivity that connects to our subsystems and to the IT systems based on all the different verticals and purposes of the buildings that are out there. And bring that data all to our platform, where we can distribute the data to our SaaS applications. Currently there's Operation Manager, Security Manager, a 360 Viewer, Energy Manager and Safety Manager, also some nice cool analytics performance applications that are due to be released pretty soon. This is Building X, Energy Manager, one of the software applications. It's cool. I've got a demo, and I can show it to anybody afterwards if they like. But it's just that gives that transparency and a little bit of intelligence on top, where making it easier to forecast your energy consumption over time, and get a clear view of your full building portfolio over an estate or campus or globally, and really try and see what are the root causes of your any energy inefficiencies. This is our 360 Viewer. Again, very handy for our building operators, and the skill shortage is a big challenge right now, and having the expertise is difficult on every location, every campus, and the amount of time that people spend in vans and traveling from place to place to try and fix simple problems. We're just trying to make that easier to get access and scale the expertise that's out there for ourselves as Siemens, as building service providers, and for end customers, end users. I put in a use case here. I'm conscious on time. Ken, am I okay? Yeah. 2 minutes. Sound. So the University of Birmingham is a partnership between Siemens and the university, and they're doing lots of really cool stuff there. There's a 10-year partnership in place, and 23,000 of these sensors are being installed right now. But it's a campus-wide upgrade. It's not just about IoT. It's about BMS, digital twin for their grid, and really trying to decarbonize the campus with really ambitious targets and a great partnership approach, creating the smartest and most sustainable university campus in the world. So it's quite an ambitious target there. So as Siemens, we provide solutions and services for customer success. So it's all about the people, and we do a lot, but we're not trying to do everything. We're trying to contribute towards that ecosystem and bring the best solutions and the best applications that we've got to help out in that overall system. There's knowledgeable experts in all sorts of parts of that. The various slides that I've shown you there today. My expertise, or my area of concept that I'm focusing on, is buildings, but we've got quite a strong industrial division, healthcare, and an awful lot of other aspects to what Siemens do. Try and provide world-class delivery and deliver our digital technology. Smart buildings platform, digital twin, some AI coming more so to the fore, and complementing our broad portfolio of products and solutions. So I hope that was okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Very interesting, and I'm sure you could have talked for a lot more, but I think all of us are conscious of our own buildings, be it our houses, our offices, our factories, or wherever we're working, becoming smarter. And I suppose the technologies and the solutions that are out there can help us make them smarter. Manufacturing with IMR. So David is going to talk from a manufacturing perspective, and obviously huge issue for us here in the southeast, but also across the country generally, how we make the transition in the manufacturing world to decarbonisation. So David, I hope he has all the answers. We shall wait and see. So over to you.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, so as Ken said, I'm from Irish Manufacturing Research. We're an Enterprise Ireland funded centre. We've been around in existence since 2015, and our role in the ecosystem is to help demystify, de-risk, and deliver emerging technologies and concepts for manufacturing industry. And we do that through our 4 pillars that you can see on the screen: digitization, automation, advanced control, design for manufacturing, and then sustainable manufacturing, the group that I head up. I suppose today the title of the presentation was the circular innovation gap. So I'm going to talk to you about the circular economy and what that is, and why it means a fully regenerative economy where we ultimately end up with zero waste. Thank you. Feedback on myself. But essentially what a circular economy means, I need to get this to be crystal clear. There's 9 R's, or up to 9 R's, as you can see on the far left there. It's not just about recycling. There is a number of R's in there, all the way up through the value chain, to the very, very top one, which may or may not be topical, is to refuse to actually make the product in the first place. So decision making, do we actually need that product? So a circular economy allows you to challenge the norm. The benefits of it, it's obviously you can measure and identify potential waste, preventable waste, move unavoidable waste streams up a hierarchy of valorization. That allows you to potentially create new business models. It offers continuous improvement opportunities. Fundamentally, it'll save you money by reducing waste in your energy bills. And then it addresses what you see now a lot in the ecosystem is customer demands, looking for sustainable products, reduced carbon impacts, etc. So what is driving the circular economy? Well, we're all very, very aware of this stuff. So as you can see, the prices, the price index is all going one way at the moment, and the far left is the energy one based around Germany's baseline of energy load, which kind of sets the European one. If I told you that has 14% this year and last year since the baseline of between the 2010 to 2020, and it's still rising. The gas obviously is the same as well. What else driving? ESG's companies, we just heard Siemens with the first company to do its zero carbon targets. All other companies are all starting to use science-based targets, and circular economy will lead into driving and supporting this. Digitization, again, will allow you to decarbonize that 40%, and this is the part where the circular economy comes in and takes over from that. So where are we? Not great is the simple answer to that. So the EU average is 12.8%, and that means secondary raw materials being reused back into the system. As you can see, we obviously have Netherlands and Belgium up there at the very, very top. So Ireland is sitting at about 2%, and it has averaged between 1.62% over the last number. We have a bit to go. Currently exists in Ireland, so there are tons of materials used in the Irish economy from an EPA report, 5%. So if we increase the material reuse rate by 5%, that gives a €2.2 billion per year opportunity for Ireland Inc. The full potential of this circular economy hasn't yet been identified or realised in the country. We are making good strides at department levels, and the bills and the policies are there. And essentially, it highlights the fact that circular knowledge gap, capacity building and implementation and innovation exists currently in this ecosystem. And it was the business case behind our project Circulaire, which I'm just going to talk to you about in a few slides. Where in Ireland? So all of these reports have carried out that there's about 8 sectors that are key to this. Obviously agriculture from a circular and a bioeconomy using materials there. The pharma sector, plastics, construction, packaging, furniture and textiles and clothing are the key sectors that will drive a circular. But all the companies then to understand their carbon footprint. So we've carried out a number of audits. We've baselined them on a CO2 perspective on scope 1, 2 and 3. We've done action plans with them, carried out a register of opportunities for them so they can implement and set targets with them so they can implement a circular economy proof of concepts. Over the building, as I was saying, the one-to-one assessments, we have an infographic, it's on their stand over there, and then we've also got a circular maturity assessment model. And what that simply does is allows companies understand their readiness to embrace circularity, measures them where they are, and then measures them where they would like to go, and offers them a list of opportunities to do that. It also baselines them against peers in their sector. We funded 10 innovation pilots throughout the 3 years. We had €500,000 or €1.5 million, €500,000 a year to fund demonstrators in that area. So we have everything from using waste for fuel, reverse logistics, getting polymers in the construction industry back to the OEM that they can put it back into their ecosystem, to metal CRM, looking at identifying, using artificial intelligence to identify critical rare earth materials going through waste streams and pulling them out and segregating them quicker on the waste streams. And then also on that, we've also funded a incubator, early stage incubator for 15 circular economy new ventures. And that is to try and get them into the ecosystem. Obviously, as you send the slide before, you can see our ecosystem of them 50 companies. So potentially any of these new ventures, if they come up with a product or a slide, could get into the supply chain and ultimately help one of the multinationals or the SMEs on their circular journey. And then finally, we do a lot of collaboration, obviously, and we're working with the EU hotspot network. So we're part of that, it's Ireland's Circular is Ireland's EU hotspot for circular economy. So we work with all the other hotspots across Europe and the world, and then we can share learnings, what Ireland is doing, and on vice versa, what all the leading countries are doing, and we bring them knowledge and capability back into Ireland. We obviously work with the OECD on circular cities, and then we head up the NSAI standard development and ISO 323, which is the circular economy standard that's going to coming for release. It's been developed now and be released in 2024. I'm very quick, Ken, by the way, talking. Catching all their time back up. So just to, I suppose, to close that innovation gap, just a couple of final kind of words. How do Irish industries scale? Obviously, we need access to materials. So to increase secondary raw material use, you need access to materials, you need access to a particular quality of material, particular standard of material, security of that material. If you're going to use it, you're not going to take a punt and 1 week it's there and the next week it's not there. So you need security of supply on that. So, and in the department are actually going to work in the next number of months, next year, of creating that database of these secondary raw materials that could potentially use, and we'll be helping feeding into that. So again, it's enabling the circular economy. The infrastructure, as I said, digital infrastructure is going to be key. The markets to allow buy and sell of these material, again, the key. Data is key for all of this. Understanding how the data transfers, what the data is telling you, et cetera, is going to be key for all of that. Regulatory streamlining. The EPA will be the enforcement agency for a circular economy. Most circular economy are these these products, waste going into the ecosystem. They're classified as waste. If you were to use them again, they have to be reclassified as an end of waste product or potentially a byproduct. So the EPA are working very, very closely with industry to understand how that can be delivered over the next number of years. And it's going to be the catalyst and the key to enabling a circular economy is getting that material reuse back into the ecosystem. And then finally, you need enabling policy, which we're seeing. The government are leading on this now. They've already put the circular economy bill, they're already putting an action plan in, and they're working towards helping companies and understand what that is, and there'll be more to come to follow that. They have implemented an interdepartmental circular economy group to now make sure that there's joined up thinking across the department in enforcing a circular economy. And finally, I suppose, it's been said a number of times this morning, collaboration is the key to implementing circularity. There is no one company that can be circular by itself in its nature. It has a supply chain, it uses actors, so collaboration across that is fundamentally key to driving circularity in Ireland. So just a couple of significant opportunities lie ahead. Circularity is central to Ireland achieving its decarbonisation goals. Again, as I was saying, that 5% material reuse, recycling improvement, that's a €2.3 billion opportunity that's sitting there for Ireland at the moment. Embedding circularity in Irish economy demands a collective effort by Irish society, so industry, policymakers, academia, third sector, citizens. It is interdisciplinary, so again, it's not engineers like Sean from the Toys4Engineers was saying. You need for engineering, material science, business, lawyers, etc. So this is an open collaboration. The benefits, again, as I said, you measure and identify potential waste, continuous improvement, but ultimately it potentially could create new business streams for companies. It will save you money. It will save on the bottom line by reducing waste and reducing energy. All that are cost streams at the moment. And just as I said, just a couple of, to get the knowledge out there again, we have a thematic working group tomorrow, financing the circular economy, so you can obviously register. We have a stand over there if you want to take the barcode. There's circularity and profitability in construction, so there's an event next week where we're co-hosting that with the Dutch Embassy. Again, obviously, Netherlands are at the forefront of circular economy, so bringing best practice into Ireland, understanding that. Our own public conference is going to happen on the 23rd of November. So that conference will be all around them 10 innovation projects that I just spoke about there that we funded. So you will hear more detail about each one of them projects and how these companies have embraced circularity through collaborations. And then finally, next year is a very, very big year in regards to circular economy, because Dublin is hosting the circular economy hotspot. So this is where Ireland puts its best foot forward to showcase all the latest and greatest circular economy activity that we have going on in the country. So this is an international event. It'll be, from a circular economy perspective, it will be highly public, and so if you have any interest, come over to the stand, etc., and we'll sign up. And I think that's me. Follow us on social media. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Very interesting. And if you haven't heard about circularity or the circular economy, I think we all will be more and more in the future. Obviously, David's ahead of the game to a certain extent with his group and what he's doing with manufacturing, so it's much appreciated. And I think you might be staying for a little while as well, David. So we're now coming to the last session of the conference, and we've decided to end with a slightly different twist, where some of our experts are already coming to the stage, which is great. I'll introduce them all shortly. So we decided to finish the conference with a discussion, really, and on the overall transition to a green future. And hopefully we have Tricia here.
You were nervous, Ken, and you should have been.
Oh, sorry, okay. I'll just introduce Tricia Murray. Tricia is here from leading the energy services team at Energia, and we're delighted that she can be here today. Tricia, you have the very difficult job of managing, well, I won't say, two of the four are fine. The other two we'll reserve judgment. No, we're talking to you, Andrew. So if you don't mind, Tricia, I'll introduce the four, first of all, and then I'll invite you to facilitate the discussion. So the four we have, and we start at the very far away from me, is Andrew Lynch, Chief Innovation Officer at Irish Manufacturing Research, self-proclaimed rock star, but we'll let him ride with that. Beside him is Grania Kennedy. Grania has recently joined Waterford City and County Council as the Climate Action Coordinator, and I know we're hoping to work closely with Grania and her team in the near future in the city. Next we have Alexandra Hamilton, Senior Energy Engineer with, I can now say, the Southeast Energy Agency, which is great, and Chair of the Association of Irish Energy Agencies. So Alexandra, thanks for coming. And finally, just to my left here is Dr. Jonathan Downey, Co-Founder and Technical Director with Mono Biologics, based here in Waterford, and obviously a Director of the Chamber as well, Jonathan, so many hats, and thanks for coming. So now I'm going to hand over to Tricia, and we wish you the best over the next 20 minutes. Thank you.
So thank you very much for inviting me here today. I've heard a lot of collective and recurring themes through all the various lectures and presentations that we've had. That is data and the interconnectivity of data. It's a pertinent and a very necessary tool to allow us to measure our journey on the energy transition, and that can come in many forms and many formats, from IoT to the very important research being carried out by the universities. A lot of universities mentioned here today, SETU, prime example, UCD, DCU, Trinity, all fantastic research tools for industry to use, and also driven by government policy. So collaboration is there today. I see collectiveness is mentioned. So no one company can work on its own on this journey, and it is very much a collective journey and collaboration. So energy transition is such a huge and often talked about topic today, and it's great to see it happen. I would have worked in carbon footprinting many years ago when it was a luxury, and it very much disappeared during the last recession, but it's back on topic today and such an important tool. And not is it only the footprint, it's the action of that footprint, and trying to reduce it is all important. And I'm filled with optimism by all the lectures that happened here today. There's so much going on, and the activity is, it's great to see, and it fills me with optimism, and I hope the generations coming behind us can feel that, because they are the ones who are going to drive it forward. Whatever we start, they have to action and follow through. So that's my background. Sorry, I just launched right in there. I work in energy services for Energia, and yeah, the energy industry is getting a right old kicking these days, but do you know what? Where would we be without the investment by the energy industries in our infrastructure, particularly in electricity? The amount, we've a 3 billion energy, positive energy investment program that's been in place for a number of years now, heavily investing in offshore wind, onshore wind, battery storage, solar, all these industries that are necessary to decarbonise the grid. So although it's a tough time for us in the energy industry, and the knock-on impact is felt by everybody in this room and far beyond, there's a lot to be done, but the investment is happening, and by 2030 we plan to triple our amount of renewable capacity on the grid. So take heart, there is stuff going on, and we will get through this tough time. You know, we've done it before, we'll do it again. So enough about me and Energia, and on to all the good people here and our discussions. So this is an energy transition based discussion. So I'll ask each and every one of you your role in your organisation and your energy transition journey, and what's happening within your organisation in relation to that journey. So I might as well start at the beginning. And hold on.
And Andrew Lynch is my name.
Andrew
That's
Lynch.
it. You're
Thank
okay,
you very
Tricia.
much. Cheers.
Tricia, you're okay. This is ultimately. Can you hear me at the back? You can hear me, can you? Thank you, Ramesh. What about you, Beth? Can you hear me? Just give me a little wave if you can hear me. There you go. Was that hard? There you go. It's great to be here. My name is Andrew Lynch. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer with Irish Manufacturing Research, IMR.ie. You heard a colleague of mine there, David, speaking beforehand. David has the advantage in the sense that he actually knows what he's talking about. I'm just the beautiful mouthpiece that comes. Are you turning me off? Oh, good stuff. I'm the beautiful mouthpiece. There you are. I know where you are. I know where you live. The beautiful mouthpiece that goes out and explains the higher level stuff as well. I think for IMR, and we represent the largest cluster of manufacturing companies in the research entity in the state. Intel, Johnson & Johnson, Boston Scientific, all of these fantastic companies, along with small to medium-sized enterprises. And there's a massive challenge on energy. And we could be very negative about the challenge on energy, but like John said earlier on from Siemens, I loved your presentation, by the way. I love toys. I'm a simple child. Some of that stuff was incredible. And Tricia, you've given us an example of, you know, the struggles that you guys are having, and yet there are goals there that you are going to achieve. And what I loved about this morning's talks was the optimism and the focus from an Irish perspective. You know, we could see it everything from buses, what we're doing in Siemens, what we're seeing locally, and that's where I get my energy from. That's what I love about this country. That's what I can only see a positive opportunity here. This isn't a negative. We've got fantastic people, fantastic companies, fantastic suppliers, and we have a problem. And the Irish are at their best when they're solving problems. And I just like to congratulate you on a fantastic opportunity. Great to have a stage to present here. And IMR is part of that journey, but as I said, it's a very, very positive journey. I'm looking forward to getting more into it. So Andrew Lynch, Chief Innovation Officer with IMR is my name. Chief Innovation Officer means I'm incredibly important. That's all you need to worry. After that, you're grand. Good stuff.
How do you follow that? Okay, my name is Gráinne Kennedy, and I am the Climate Action Coordinator for Waterford City and County Council. I've only recently started my job, and everyone that I meet, they think it's very funny to say, oh, it's sorted then, is it? And I'm like, yeah, climate change, all done and dusted. So my role is to make sure that the council in our operations, be it in the buildings we use, in everything that we construct, that it is sustainable and it is energy efficient, and also that we plan for climate change. So what are the areas that might flood? What are the areas that might have drought? All these different complicated ideas. And then we also have to help everyone else in the council to reduce their carbon emissions. So that's in transport, it may be in renewable energy projects, it may be in helping businesses find out information around energy saving, which we did recently, and maybe even car sharing and things like that. So it's multifaceted. There is a transition plan for the city in particular. We're working on the one for the county. And it's actually, I'm down at the door if anyone wants to have a look at it. And we're started and things are getting going and we know where we are and where we have to get to. And we would love to have people participate with us. And this is why we're here today to talk about what we have to do. So thank you. That's me.
Thanks, Grania. My name is Alex Hamilton. I'm the senior engineer with the South East Energy Agency. We were previously Three Counties Energy Agency, and before that we were the Carlow Kilkenny Energy Agency. So we have expanded. We're trying to take over the world, but we'll stick to the southeast of Ireland for the moment. We've actually worked with Grania, or Grania worked with us until she left with left to join Waterford City and County Council. So we have good links there, and that's why we are now part of the Waterford region as well. So our aim in the Energy Agency is to help every citizen across the southeast realise and deliver the energy and carbon transition that we're that we're all here to talk about. So we've all had and heard of the 2020 targets, the 2030 targets, the 2050 targets, and everything we heard this morning was all numbers and data and the toys and the technologies and the innovation that are going to help us get there. But our role in the Energy Agency is to simplify that and to make that understandable to everyday citizens. Not only that I think as well this morning very much concentrated on the technologies and how the new technologies and the innovations that can help us get there. But from our point in the Energy Agency is to take that step back. And I think in the circular economy presentation that was given there, one of the items was to rethink and to look at, do we need this at all? So we want to reduce our energy consumption first. It's absolutely critical to us in the Energy Agency that we rethink how we use energy and we rethink our user behaviour. So before we need the innovative technologies that we've all been listening to this morning, let's reduce our use first. That's one of our key areas in the Energy Agency.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Downey. I'm not as famous or noteworthy as Dr. Lynch down the end there, but one can only hope. So I worked in medical device manufacturing for longer than I care to remember, and in the last couple of years I've transitioned to biologics manufacturing, and recently have founded a company in the single-use biologics sector. So everyone will probably bristle when they hear the word single-use, but I will explain why I think it's probably a more environmental way to manufacture life-saving medicines. And I may draw fire, but I'll get to that.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Yeah, I hear you on single-use plastics. That's what we'd be more used to, I suppose, in the catering and that. But very interesting to hear from a medical perspective. I think this furthers needs and requirements for evidence-based policy, and we see a lot of consultations now coming out from government where they want evidence-based policy. Everyone has an opinion, but we need the evidence to back up your opinions on that, especially during consultations when forming policy. So the energy crisis is a hot topic, as is energy transition. So I'm going to fire this to Alexandra. Do you see the current energy crisis as an enabler and a speeder upper, an accelerator of short to medium terms of businesses to transition away from fossil fuels, or do you see it as an inhibitor?
Yeah, very good question. I think in a sense we will take a positive out of what is an extremely negative situation. So I see it as an enabler. And I'll give you a very simple example of this. I was in my local Centra shop last night buying a new bulb for my fridge because it broke. Went down, William in our local Centra. William, do you have a new bulb? And we ended up talking for 5 minutes about energy. Yeah. And how much energy is wasted when you leave your fridge. And there was a few people in the shop and we all started talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's on everybody's mind. Yeah. Every single one is so aware now of energy and how can we save energy in our own house because of the shortage and therefore the increase in prices, etc. So in a sense, in that way, I'm going to say it is enabling us because that message is now, or that it's in everyday conversation. It's something that we have been talking about for years, but now, as I said, I go into my local shop and it's something I can have a conversation with, not meaning to. So I'm going to say in that way, it's getting the message out and we're all talking about it and asking the questions, how can we change? What are the simple things that we can change ourselves in our own homes or in our own businesses, in our own offices, etc.
I think that collective, the power of one, and that every individual can make a difference is really beginning to feed through, whereas more a high-level thought, it's really from the bottom up now this is going to be driven. Now I'm going to ask Grania, how do you think collaboration between industry, government and research, how does this feed into the energy transition journey for you?
Oh, it's everything really, because the issues that we have are from maybe, so say if we take the example of transport, we have collaboration between the counties and the government organisations in the NTA. We might have local universities looking at research around behaviour change. We might have the council ourselves doing active travel measures. All of these issues have quite complicated challenges. So we're very lucky in the Southeast that we have the Energy Agency, the university that we rely on. We have government agencies and we're keen to work together. And even this week I've had my fellow council in other different councils, the climate action coordinators, and we were all working together on delivering projects because it makes more sense for us to do it all together and to save time and do it quickly than for each of us to be reinventing the wheel. And that's how it's going to go from now on, I think.
Yeah, a very well-resourced corner of Ireland with the experience that's available here. And now on, let me see who will be next. So, Andrew, manufacturing covers such a breadth of topics, of industries. How, the practicalities for business in relation to the energy transition, how do you cover that? It's such a breadth of industries.
It's a great question, Tricia, and I guess just to give manufacturing a frame, it's more than 30% of our GDP in this country. It's 11% of our employment. In Munster, we make 60% of the world's hip and knee joints. We make 30% of the world's contact lenses on this island. We make most of the Viagra, all the Botox, and 63% of the world's Tic Tacs. So it doesn't matter what sector you go into, this small island has a massive, massive input to play in. What's really interesting about manufacturing in Ireland is that we are a small enough country to be connected, where we can collaborate in mechanisms like my colleague Dave was talking about, Circle Era, where you're bringing all of these industries and all of these sectors together. And yet we're big enough to be able to play at an international level. The other thing that's really interesting is the colour green. One day a year, every one of our politicians, sometimes you hear about the cost of St. Patrick's Day and sending these guys away. Everybody who earns a wage in this country as a political representative should be forced off the island somewhere for that entire week in March 17th. The whole world goes green in an Irish context. We own the brand internationally on the most important colour globally, green. So when we kind of look at both of those things, what we're trying to do, the transition we're doing, etc., we can be an international exemplar of how it's done. And that's the key thing here. We've got to stop thinking about this as a negative. that we have to do something by this date. These dates get too far ahead of us. I'm in my 50s, you know, some of these dates are not going to be around for me, as the man says. We need opportunities. We need to look at what are the opportunities to become an international leading country in this space. Can you imagine if our IDA parks were branded and were completely built on green energy? What would that do for the IDA when they're bringing in these so-called multinational or foreign direct investment opportunities into the areas like the southeast here? Can you imagine if you were an American multinational decision maker and you heard what Grania is saying, what Alex is saying here around the connectivity that we have, the Circulera, that presentation that we got there from Dave, the acknowledgement from Siemens that you're not trying to do it all and that you're part of an ecosystem. Welcome to the game, we're delighted. This idea of closed walled environments is a huge, huge issue for most manufacturing companies. So just on energy, let me just throw something at you. If I'm a process energy, if I'm a process company like Pfizer and so on, energy is a big, big cost. If I'm running a foundry like Johnson & Johnson Dupuy, energy is a big cost. But if I'm running a discrete manufacturing company, how big a cost is energy in that context? It's clearly a line item. We can't afford any P&L line items to be multiplying themselves by 4. But there are other factors here, like the resilience element internationally, which feeds into what we're talking about in terms of energy and energy efficiencies and so on. We can't get the raw materials we need, the transport costs, the green cost of transporting goods, the opportunity that an island on the western part of Europe can set up its own manufacturing processes because of the advent of 3D printing and so on, which we have. Ramesh here, put your hand up there, Ramesh, so people can see you, runs an organization just around the corner here called SEAM, probably one of the best institutions you're going to find in additive manufacturing anywhere in the country. That allows companies to put manufacturing sites in places that were unviable even 20 years ago. So there's a massive opportunity in this greening of our industry. What we can't have is greenwashing, this idea that we'll buy carbon credits somewhere, plant trees over here, while we continue to destroy the earth. That's where manufacturing gets a bad name. We need to make sure that does not happen. But equally, there's a social responsibility for us as consumers. We need to invest in companies that are green. We need to stop throwing our Coca-Cola cans into the sea. Nobody in Coca-Cola makes a can and then chucks it into the sea. We're doing that. We need to radically improve our behavior, and we need to support manufacturing in this. And the final point I'll make around this whole area is that this concept that Dave was talking about, circularity, this idea that you take something, you build it in a manner and design it in a manner that can be reused after its full life purpose, and that it goes into your supply stream again. That idea that he mentioned around 2.5 billion euros of recyclable opportunity for us in this country, that's the space we need to be playing in. That's the area that makes a massive difference from a manufacturing perspective. We need to get clever, smarter, better, faster. And we'll have a wonderful economy as being supported by manufacturing, and it can get even better.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, just a few points brought up by Andrew in the circular economy, and you mentioned single measure medical devices. Do they compete, the innovation of those devices, do they compete with the energy transition journey, or do they go hand in hand?
I suppose, firstly, I would echo what Andrew just said there in terms of what a fantastic economy Ireland Inc. has. 80%, you're wrong by the way, it's not 100%, 80% of the world's Botox comes out of a plant up in Westport. So as an economy, we are absolutely punching above our weight. Now, in terms of, the medical industry in Ireland is significant, obviously. You mentioned our friends up in Limerick and down in Cork. But in terms of the single use, and I've thought a lot about this since moving into this industry, everybody hates to hear about something being disposable, because disposable typically, conjures images of the thing in the Pacific Ocean, the garbage thing that everybody's trying to clean up, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. So if you kind of take a step back and think about single-use manufacturing versus the energy costs associated with continuous manufacturing. So say, for example, in the biologics industry, you know, with single use, you get to process the product once. Yeah, you throw the product contact pathways away, but you don't have that massive water usage to clean the process down. You don't have, more importantly, chemicals, acids, alkalines, whatever it is, to clean it down. And you get to switch your manufacturing process on quicker. So, you know, it's counterintuitive. I know, I get that, right? But it actually does make sense. We've done the maths on it, and it actually is more energy efficient to use single use. Now, having said that, you absolutely then need to decide what you're going to do with, you know, waste plastics, waste liquid silicone rubbers, whatever it is. And that's a problem for somebody else to solve, and I'm not washing my hands of it. But when you do the economics and the actual carbon footprint, single use in biologics, just as an example, is a far more both economical, and we can't lose sight of the fact that, you know, companies have to make money as well, but it is more economically friendly.
I would just like to say about, you know, I suppose it depends what your base material is, you know, very much dependent on that. And I think in relation to energy, manufacturing, medical, whatever it is, every action has an equal or opposite reaction that we have to be aware of. There is no one fix-all solution to any problem. And sometimes we resolve a problem only to create another.
No, you're absolutely right, and it is about balancing that equation, and that's not an easy equation to balance. But you know, it's like, you know, do we just stop making this stuff? And we can't do that. We just can't. I mean, next generation oncology products. Everybody in this room is going to be affected by that at some point. We need that stuff, and I'm not an industry advocate. It's just go on.
Clearly, you're an industry advocate. God, you're founding a company based on single use. You said you did the maths. Did the maths go all the way to the end of the incineration of that part, for example? The transport of it off the island, the burning of it? I mean, you know, if we start from the first to the very end, and I take your point on energy and water use and so on, but whether it's pharmaceutical or creameries or dairies or whatever it is, they are using that idea.
And that's a great question. And it's a question I've asked our customers, and I've been met with blank looks where I say, well, what do you actually do with these single-use systems when they're done, when they're disposed of? And remember, single-use, if you end up in hospital with an intravenous drip, that's a single-use system. Like, there's nothing new about this.
But that's because it's individual to the person themselves, probably a contamination issue. You're making an active decision to use single-use in a manufacturing environment. I'm not saying that what you're doing isn't worth doing. It's the how you're doing. When you say you've got the maths, are you saying right from the beginning to right to the end? It's a bit like the Prius argument. It's much easier to run a Prius, it's kinder in the environment. To manufacture a Prius, there's a huge issue. This idea of evidence-based, have you taken it all the way to the end? I don't think it's enough to say I gave it to my customer and I don't know what he does. You know, is that good enough?
Roll back to the example of the intravenous bag, right? That's a personalized medicine because it's for one person, right? The development of cell and gene therapies, and there's been fantastic successes around the world in curing horrible diseases with cell and gene therapy, and the cost has come down massively, as you well know. That is equally a personalized thing. So you think about that, right? You take the bag, the pump, the filter, whatever, right? And you try to reuse it. You've got to ship it to an irradiation plant. You've got to sterilize it. You've got to clean it. You're potentially exposing somebody to somebody's previous ailment or whatever. So there's a holistic question to be asked there as well. You know, and I did say I was going to be a little controversial here, right? Sorry.
I'd just like to say single-use, I think in medicine is probably necessary and a requirement. So needs and must-have. But how many can put your hand up and say you used a single-use coffee cup this morning? The impact of ruling them out and getting rid of them is huge. So we have to be careful what battles we pick. So who wants? There's a lot of hands up. Alexandra, go ahead.
I just wanted to pick up on the point here. I know nothing about manufacturing of medical equipment, but I think the I think the point here is that when we are looking at any process or anything we do, it needs to be the whole life cycle costs and life cycle emissions, etc., that we look at, whether it's building a home and what materials we use to build a home, concrete versus timber versus other low carbon materials, etc., or versus if it's one single-use medical equipment. The point here is that we need to look at the whole process from start to finish, the embodied carbon, the embodied emissions with all of the materials, etc., that we're using from start to finish. I think that's a point I'd like to make.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that we can't let perfection be the enemy of good on this. So I would say, I'm not completely on your side, Jonathan. I'm just saying that years from now, it may be that you may be able to do that without, and there is that bit that you're missing, unfortunately, with how customers engage, because we can, Alex may know from start to end what the embodied impact of the materials she works with are, but she mightn't necessarily know how the person uses the building. So, there is a gap there at the moment, and unfortunately, we can't know for definite. But, there may be that in a few years, there may be a technology or a way of doing things that then, in that case, you might be able to do. But there is, as someone who is looking at this all day, there is so much for us all to do. There may be things that we mightn't do now, but we should, in our kind of goals, set a target for ourselves. Okay, we'll look at that back again in 2 years, because the technology on everything is moving so fast. But it does, of course, all these technologies need to be economical before they'll be used as much as they can be. So that's just my thought.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious that time is passing by, and if anybody would like to ask a question, or...
I have a roving mic if anybody from the audience would like to ask a question at this stage.
No. Obviously well covered by our panel members.
Very quiet.
Yeah.
But, okay, I think at this stage, maybe we just thank everybody. So thanks Tricia, thanks Jonathan, Alex, Grania and Andrew. It's always good to have a debate, and there's no one answer, which is obviously came clear there. But I think it was a lovely way to round off a fantastic set of presentations. So well done to all our presenters today. Really appreciated everybody here. I see Stephen, John, David, and everybody else that was here earlier on. So Bill and so on. So we were delighted with the event. I think it's been very useful. I'd like to thank Energia, obviously. We'd like to thank NTT Data. I'd like to thank Clem, Jacob, for obviously helping with a lot of the expo here today. And again, just thank you for attending, both here and indeed online. Very, very much appreciative, and hopefully we all learned something. So I think we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. It was fascinating to learn about the impact of